I feel like we all, in every area of our life, physical, spiritual, family, financial, work, whatever it is, we all need to have goals. We all need to have big goals, because that is the heading by which we drive. And I used this illustration the other day. I said, I used to fish a lot down in the Keys. Me and a couple buddies for a couple years, we got to where we like to go down there and deep sea fish. And so I got to be pretty proficient in navigating out at sea. And, when we would be done with a full day of fishing, we would start heading in, and you would get to that point, usually about the 8-mile mark, and you could start to see the horizon of land. And there was always a tall building in Key Largo that we would put the heading on. We would start driving toward that big tower. And along the way, sometimes we would run across fishing holes, and we would stop and we would fish and catch fish. And then we would be right back on our way, keeping our eye on that big building. And that's an illustration I used, that big building is a big goal.
Yeah.
It's so far out there, it's going to take us a long time to get there, but it keeps us traveling in a straight line. Contrast that to, sometimes we would be out, no sight of land, and we would be looking for a weather buoy, which is a small weather station out in the middle of the water, and we would be all over the place trying to find that weather buoy. And even when we got to it, the boat would drift around, and this is kind of getting biblical, we would be tossed to and fro by the wind, and it was just so hard to keep the boat on that weather buoy to fish. And I think so many times we have short-term goals, but we have nothing out there in the future. And if we're always just looking at the here and now and what our goals are now, we're kind of like that boat in the water. We can see it, but we're just drifting all over the place. But if we have that big goal out there in the future, for a lot of people, it's the Boston Marathon. If we're going to put this in physical goals, it's the Boston Marathon. That's been a big goal of mine for years, and it still is a goal. I keep saying I'm going to have to let my age catch up with my time, but it's still a goal. One day, I want to run the Boston Marathon. If I keep on that trajectory, then when I have tough years, when I have injuries, when I have all these things, I can remain on that heading, and I can look back and I can see how far I've come. But if you don't have that thing way out there, then you're just going to be tossed around by these constant small goals that we have. When you're focused on something way out there where God's got you going, then you're not looking down at these little things all around you. Then you can see the opportunities that God puts in front of you. Mm-hmm. And if you're constantly buried in your head in what's going on today, so many times we drive right by the doors that God opens in our lives.
Well, and let me add to that, because I totally agree, 100% I agree with you. But here's where I think the disconnect is, because I think we all have some sort of a goal in our mind. So it's hard to figure out, how do I get motivated today about a goal I have in 2028? Well, let me tell you how you do that. You have a system. You need a system to go with your goals. You can't just have a goal and let that be the only thing that drives you. Because then what happens if something happens and that goal is taken away for whatever reason? Or you get to that day, and in this case, she got to her goal day and it didn't have another thing on the horizon. You got to have something in place. So for me, my system is, I'm going to get out and I'm going to run every day. That's from a fitness standpoint. That's what I'm going to do. If there's not a race that I'm targeting, well, I'm going to run today. Your system may be, I want to run 3 times a week. I want to be active 6 days a week. Whatever it might be, you have to have some kind of a system in place to keep you on track. Just like in that boat, on that boat, you've got that boat. headed in a direction, and that's your system. Your system is we're headed in that direction, and then when other things pop up around your system, you handle those things as they come. Right?
Yeah, and I think the Couch to Marathon just kind of popped in my head as you were saying that, because it is a typical model that we should use in every area of our life. For people who sign up for the Couch to Marathon, many of them have never run in their life, and they've put this goal out there that in 54 weeks, they're going to run a marathon. And then what's between that 54 weeks and today? It's 54 systems.
Yeah.
We've got 3 other races in between. We've got things that you do every day, and we have a system in place so that you can get to that long-term goal. And you've got goals in between. We've got a 5K, a 10K, a half marathon. And if something happens at any one of those, say you got sick and you weren't able to run your 5K. Well, because you have a system in place, you have the confidence that you can still get to that marathon.
That's right.
But if you didn't have that system in place, chances are you're never going to get to that marathon. And on the flip side, if all you have is the goal of running a marathon and you have no system in place, you're never going to get to that marathon. So it's both and.
That's right.
You've got to have the system and the goal. That system that we have in the Couch to Marathon, put that in your physical life, put that in your spiritual life, put that in your family, put that in your financial plan, put that in your work goals. It works for so many things. And when you have the peace of God and you have a plan in place, man, it feels like everything, not that you're never going to have issues, because you will, but life seems to be much more structured, enjoyable. The whole process is better when you have those 2 things in place.